Hi, good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining me today on what is kind of a big topic, Maine sales and use tax. I appreciate people taking time out of their busy day to subject with me. So, excuse me, my name is Chris Cole, and I'm a senior advisor here at the Maine SBDC. I've been with the SBDC for over 4.5 years, but I'm also happy to say I've been a client of the SBDC for a few decades. So I know this great. It works. If you are not already somebody who uses our services, we have 11 advisors throughout the state. So you can find somebody from Kittery all the way up to Fort Kent. And we provide free confidential advising. This is for anybody that's getting ready to start a business, if you're in the growth phase of your business, or if you're getting ready to sell your business. So these are all the services here that we can provide to you as a business owner. The businesses, unfortunately, we cannot help people that are in the cannabis business. That's out of our realm. But pretty much everybody else we can do business advising for. Um, Here's a little disclaimer as well. We're not accountants or attorneys. We're always going to have you refer to those professionals for that. And of course, when it comes to this webinar, I am not a state tax expert or a state employee. Just did a deeper dive into the subject, and hopefully, you're going to walk away with some usable information. And before we start, this webinar will be recorded. Folks are welcome to be off camera. Excuse me, the presentation will be emailed to you within a week or less. And we just ask folks if you could please keep your audio on mute, put your questions in the chat. And I know people might have questions throughout as you see something. I will get to the questions at the end of the presentation, and hopefully I'll be able to answer most, if not all, of your questions. So without further ado, I'm just going to stop my video so you can watch the slides and not me, and we will go into it. So Maine didn't always have sales tax. It started in 1951. I think the first tax rate was like 1 or 2%. We are now at 5.5%. Many states, not every state in the US has sales tax. And in a lot of states, municipalities are allowed to charge their own tax on top of state sales tax. But in Maine, municipalities don't have that authority. So, like for instance, we were in San Diego a couple of years ago for a conference, and the city of San Diego can charge tax on certain items above what the state of California charges. Um, the Maine Constitution. So there's always been a question of like, is it in the Constitution or not? Who has the authority? All I can say on that subject is I've read conflicting things, but specifically the Constitution does cover taxation, and it states that taxes on real and personal property must be assessed equally. Um, so if you're thinking I can maybe get out of paying my sales tax, you can't, to answer that question. So who needs to pay sales tax? Here we have three examples. A gift shop, that would be, a sales tax at like 5.5%. Then short-term car rental, like a Dollar Car or Hertz, Avis, any of those, their tax rate is going to be at 10%. And then a cafe is going to have more than one tax rate. So most likely, because if they're selling prepared meals, prepared food, that will be at 8%. But they might also be selling like mugs and t-shirts and hats, merchandise. That would be at 5.5%. And this is a list of what the state defines as who needs to register to collect state sales tax and remit it to the state. So any tangible good, household items, giftware, clothing, automobiles, all of that. Taxable services. So this is primarily on rentals of things, like we talked about autos, but it's short and long term. Also, campers and RVs, hotel stays, and also residents. Like if you have an Airbnb, you're supposed to be collecting the lodging tax just the same as a hotel. And then a remote seller. So a remote seller is a business that's outside of the state of Maine that is making sales to residents within the state of Maine. Um, an example of that is like IKEA. So like an IKEA department store, they don't have a presence in Maine, but they do have online sales in Maine. Most likely those sales exceed that gross revenue threshold of 100,000 or 200 transactions in a year, which would mean they're required to register, collect, and remit sales tax. And then service providers. So I broke this out because this list just kind of blew my mind of I understood television and telecommunications and you know like furniture and things like that. Kind of what surprised me was like community support services, people that have in-home support services, like residential and group services. So you also have to collect a tax, and that's at 6%. Um, then we have services that don't fall under this. So they're not considered service providers. So in general, in the state of Maine, services that are provided, such as haircuts and massages, also pet grooming, things like that, carpentry, landscaping, those services in general are not taxable. But if services are sold in connection with the sale of a tangible personal property, they're considered part of that taxable sale. So, for example, if you were to, have a watch and you had asked, the person that you purchased it from to engrave it, that would be a taxable. So the whole thing would be taxable. They couldn't separate it out. But there are certain situations, and we've seen this if you ever get your car repaired, where you can separate out the service. So, for example, if you bring your car in to get serviced, and you might have $80 worth of labor and $120 worth of parts, it's just the $120 worth of parts that would be considered taxable, not the labor of the mechanic. And these are the effective tax rates. So this is right off the Maine Revenue Service website. And you can see, currently most people, the default rate, most of the items that we sell in the state are at 5.5%. But then, we certainly have all these other areas that have different tax rates. We're going to go through what you need to apply to register for your retailer certificate, which is what you end up getting from the Maine Revenue Service. So if you're a sole proprietor, you're going to use your personal social security number. All other entities, if you plan on being like an LLC, first, please register your LLC, with the state of Maine, apply for that. Then get your EIN, which is free, whole other subject. But you want to have that ready before you go to apply to collect sales tax. You'll also need to know what the NAICS code is for your industry, and that's a link there that you can click on and look up your industry. So you would just type in whatever it is that you're doing, and then usually, in general, there's a NAICS code that goes to it. So it probably end up being broader in some cases. And then you need the names and social security numbers of all the owners, directors, any of the officers of the company, physical location and mailing address. So even if you are working out of your home and you don't have per se a brick and mortar for your business, they still want to know where it's located, where you're operating out of. So you would have to use that. And then if you plan on doing the ACH, you want to make sure that you have your banking information. So I'm going to go through and hopefully be able to get us to a form, and we're going to go through this. So just bear with me a minute as I get to that form. It'll take a moment. All right. And please put in the chat if you cannot see this. All right. I don't see anybody chiming in to say that they can't see it, so we're gonna go ahead and believe that you can. We can. Great. Thanks, Pete. I appreciate it. All right. So this is the form that you're gonna fill out. And the reason that I did this, you can also do this online, by the way, and there's a link that will take you to that. But the nice thing about this form is that it has a lot of information, detailed information. Most of the questions that you might have can be answered within looking on this form. But everybody here is going to fill out this first section. And you must click on all the types that apply for the taxes. So for instance, I used to have a restaurant, and for me, it would have been the sales and use tax, and that would be the only thing. Businesses that are taxable, or sell other items that are taxed at a different rate, you have to click on all of those. And then you'll put your legal business name. In my case, I had a company, and that legal business name was Mako, but I had a different trade name. So I had a restaurant name. So if you are in the same boat where you might have a incorporation name, but you do business under a different name, you want to put that there. And then it does require your employer ID number. So if you have a entity, this is where you put in your EIN, not your social security. But if you are a sole proprietor and you're operating just under your social security, that's when you would put that in there. And of course, we go through the mailing address, all of that. And then you want to put what type of entity you are. In my case, it was an S Corp. And then you would put in your incorporating date, and the state that you incorporated in. So sometimes people are outside of the state. So the most part, I'm going to gather that people on this webinar are in Maine. So you're going to put Maine as the state. And then you're going to go down here and list off the directors, the people that are responsible, the owners, their information and social security numbers. And then you want to make sure that you list here under ownership. If it's a brand new business, you just click brand new business under 6, all right? You don't have to do anything else. But if this has been owned by somebody else, so you're acquiring an existing business, you need to list all of the information here of the former owners. So you need to have that information as well. Please make sure that you sign this form, put your title, date it, all of that. And then we're going to skip down to whichever tax area that you fall under. So for the purposes of this, sales and use tax. And you're going to fill out this entire thing. You want to make sure that you describe what it is that you're selling or renting. So, maybe you have an Airbnb, you want to put that in there. And then it will list like the thresholds here for paying your estimated taxes. So if you have between 100, or sorry, if you have $600 or more in tax liability, then you want to click that box. You'd be paying monthly. Also, if you're a seasonal business, you want to just click off the months of the year that you're open. And right here, line 18, this is really important. And we'll get to that when we get to the resale certificate. But what do you estimate that your annual gross sales will be? So this is not your tax liability, but what you think you're going to do in sales. And you want to put that amount there. You finish filling this out, you put your name as the authorized person, your social security number, and then we are done with this form, except for you need to mail it. So I'm going to stop share on this. Bear with me again. We'll go back to and continue with the slides. All right. Okay. And this is just an overview of the form. And like I said, everybody has to do section 1. Most people are going to be section 3, but you could be in a position where you have to fill out multiple parts, right? So for example, if you own a general store, maybe you are selling, cigarettes and prepared food, and you're selling gasoline, and then other retail items. So you're basically in a couple different categories. So you would need to make sure if you're in that case, that you're filling out lines like section 3 and section 5 and section 7 on that form before you send it in. And this is where you want to mail it to, but also if you have questions and you can call, they have assistance for you. Hopefully somebody answers the phone. Actually, Augusta's gotten pretty good about trying to get back to people. So if you have any questions, just make sure you call ahead of time. All right. And then this is a link at the bottom here. If you want to do it online, they have an instructional video and it's really good. And they'll walk you through that. So you can also register online if you prefer not to have all the paper. Once you finish your registration, you've sent it in, then the state will issue you a retailer certificate. This allows you to collect sales tax from consumers, and keep that tax and then remit it. This has to be displayed in your place of business in a prominent area. Um, just in case Maine Revenue Service ever stops by, they need to be able to see that you have a valid certificate. And basically, the certificate is good for the life of the company, um, or unless it gets revoked by Maine Revenue Service. So that would probably be for reasons of not paying your taxes. And it's key to know that this, along with other types of licenses from the state, are not transferable. So if you sell your business to somebody else, they cannot use your retail certificate. They would have to get a new certificate. Resale certificate. And I get this question a lot, like, how do I apply? When am I going to get the resale certificate? So if you recall back on the form, when we were filling out the sales and use tax, I said it's really important that line 18 of what are your gross sales going to be. So if you anticipate that you're going to do $3,000 or more in taxable sales per year, then you'll automatically be sent a resale certificate. And this certificate allows you as a business owner to purchase items tax-free, okay, from vendors that the items need to be able to be reused and resold in your business. You're purchasing items that you're going to use and sell in your business. And basically, an example of that would be if you are building, let's say furniture of some type, like individual cabinets or something, you can provide your vendors a certificate for resale. So you can purchase wood, the epoxy, the hinges, the hardware, but then you're turning around and you are selling this item to a consumer who's then going to pay you tax. That's when you can use your resale certificate. Once you get your certificate, I say to folks, make lots of copies of it, keep the original, because you want to be able to give that out to um, the people that you do business with, that you're buying products from, and they have to keep that on file. And some people on this call may be in a situation where you yourself wholesale some of your products to other businesses. For example, if you have a retail bakery but you also wholesale your baked goods, you need to collect the resale certificates from the businesses that you sell your products to on a wholesale basis. Permanent exemption. So this is different than the resale certificate. All right. So organizations such as churches, nonprofits, and schools are exempt from sales tax, and they have to present to you a valid certificate for you to be able to not charge them tax on the items that they purchase. You don't keep a copy of this, but you probably want to keep a notation of those sales and who you sold them to. But they need to present for permanent exemptions. And sometimes if somebody's doing regular business with you, you would maybe have a copy of this on file. When it comes to the sales and use tax, we talked about everybody that has to, as far as tangible goods go. But I always thought about use tax, like what exactly does that mean? And kind of confused me. So The best example of that is like if you purchase items, in particular, outs, let's say you get your office supplies from New Hampshire, but you're not going to use those office supplies. You're not in the business of selling office supplies like reams of paper or, pens or ink cartridges for your print. You're using them within your business. Then anytime that you draw down that inventory, you're supposed to report that and pay the tax on that. So that's an example of a use tax. There are many exemptions, just like everything else. There's lots of exemptions for different things. Of course, groceries, prescription drugs, medical devices, those are all common exemptions. And what we just talked about, items that are for resale are exempt. But the state puts out bulletins, and you, as a retailer, have to be aware and stay up to date on that. You need to know what are the taxable items and, under what conditions items are exempt. This link here goes to all the current bulletins. And again, you just need to be aware of what the state is listing for exemptions. We've gotten a retail certificate. Maybe we now have our resale certificate as well. We're getting ready to collect sales tax. First thing, program your point of sale system. So lots of times the POSs will come with, you can select your state. When you select your state, it's going to go to the default rate for the most part. So if you select Maine, it's going to go to 5.5%. You need to make sure that you program the correct sales tax for the correct items. I actually had a client who didn't realize when he selected Maine, he had a food trailer, that he was collecting sales tax at 5.5%. So you're still liable if collect at the wrong rate, you're still liable for the full amount. So if you do $10,000 in taxable sales in a month and you have it at the default rate and you're somebody who has a food trailer or a restaurant, you just only collected $550 in taxes, when you really should have collected $800 in taxes. You're still responsible to pay the amount of tax that's due. All right. So charge the appropriate tax. The consumer pays the sales tax. You collect that and set that aside. It is basically considered a trust, and that money belongs to the state. It doesn't belong to you. Don't mix it into your, general operating budget. Put it in a savings account if you can, put it aside somewhere so that you have it ready to go for when you need to file your report and remit the taxes. The requirements for filing are based on the amount of tax liability. So that's a little different on taxable sales. So on average, if you have $600 or more in tax liability per month, that works out to be $10,909, because I did the math on that, that you have in sales in per month, then you need to be a monthly filer. If you have between 100 and 600, then you're a quarterly filer. If you're getting close to that, 600 in liability, the state doesn't mind if you decide to go monthly. So you don't have to be adhered. If you're like at 550 and you're concerned, maybe you just go ahead and say you want to file monthly. And then tax returns are always due on the 15th of the month following your reporting period. So the Maine tax porthole account, you'll receive notifications. Once you've signed up, you'll receive notifications on, your filing dates coming up. Need to make aware of that. And here's just a list. If you do your monthly sales in January, let's say, and you're a monthly filer, then it's due the 15th of February. If you're a quarterly filer for the first of the year, so January, February, and March, you've done sales, they're due the 15th of April, and so on. The state has some really good resources on about how to file. So there's a couple clickable links on watching, you can watch if you're a first time user, you need to go and create your username if you're already registered. So if you, excuse me, signed up to be a retailer online, most likely you're already in that system in the Maine tax portal. If you send in the paper form, you probably have to go and set up an account in the Maine tax portal. So then you can go in and do your filing on a regular basis. It's very intuitive these days. You basically click through the next screen. It will continue to prompt you all the way. And then at the end, you will hit a confirmation number. And if you owe taxes, you'll be prompted to provide a payment method. You can do it either ACH right there, or you can also print off a voucher. So it depends on the method that you selected for payment. So you're either going to pay it right there. And I think you can schedule a later date. If you're filing your return before the 15th and you don't want to have that draw done until later, until the 15th, say you're doing it on the 10th just to get it out of the way, you can schedule that payment to be done on the 15th if you're using the ACH. But if you print the voucher out, then you're going to write a check up, send it back. And the instructional video at the bottom is really good at just walking you through that first time of doing it. I put here, this is a copy of, so this is a little bit old, but this is from my business. And basically, you have to put in all your gross sales, and your gross sales include, like if you sold items wholesale, if you sold, items that are exempt sales, all of that you need to put in there. And then you would put your exempt sales, which includes items for resale. So any of your wholesale in 2A. If you had bad debt, you put that in there. And that gets subtracted out from the total of taxable sales. And then you split it out here, right? So in my case, the majority was at the 8%. All right. Excuse me, when I put in that $56,165.94, it automatically calculated the 8%. And voila, there's my tax due. But I also sold some merchandise. Maybe I sold some hats and t-shirts that month. So that was $412, and that's at the 5.5%. Then it totals it up. And basically, you're going to print this form out, and it says the amount due. You write your check, you send it to the state, everybody's happy. We talked about some of the specific bulletins, and I just put a list here that kind of covers a lot of questions that people have for their industries. If you don't see it here, again, go to the general bulletins and you'll be able to click on that. Marketplace facilitator. So if you sell your products online, typically through Amazon or something like that, they're considered a marketplace facilitator. This is somebody that contracts as a third party seller, and they promote other people's sales. So even like Airbnb or eBay, a marketplace facilitator has to collect sales tax on behalf of all the sellers that use that platform. And they have to remit that to the state of Maine. So to be a marketplace facilitator in the state of Maine, it means that you have had 200 separate transactions or more, or $100,000 worth of business in the year. That means that you have to remit sales tax to the state of Maine. So a remote seller, they don't have to count the sales that they've done through the marketplace. All right. It's a little bit different than if you have a website where you're selling online. We'll use that example. But if all of your sales are through Amazon or eBay, or you have an Airbnb, that you do, they're going to take care of collecting the tax and remitting it to the state. And in the state we have, excuse me, the nexus, right? So this is used in connection with the states doing business, or businesses that are conducting businesses in states or local governments, And it ultimately triggers a tax collection. And we're going to talk about the minimum thresholds. We're not going to go through each state, but that's what a nexus is. And here is a map of the different states and what their thresholds are. Usually, most small operators, you're not going to hit that threshold um, unless you have, a lot of sales to a specific state that collects sales tax. But this is just a list by color code. And then, of course, there are some states that don't collect tax at all, like New Hampshire, and you don't have to worry about any of the sales in New Hampshire. The times that you need to worry about collecting sales tax. So, for example, if you use marketplace facilitator like an Amazon, then and you also have your own online store or even a physical presence within the state, you're going to need to have a retail registration for your presence in the state or your online store where you're doing business on your own, and you'll have to collect tax from that and then remit it to the state. So you still have to collect those taxes if they're outside of using the marketplace facilitator. There are apps that you can get for tax collection, which will help folks when you have an online business that's not through a marketplace facilitator. So this is a list of the different add-ons that you can get. TaxJar is the one I see the most. For the most part, TaxJar is what I hear from folks is it's pretty good. It will, collect the tax from the consumers from the different states and remit it to the states. It's all seamless. That money you don't have to worry about holding on to or collecting. Um, the link at the bottom just shows in that there's about 15 different options, and you can go in and look to see the details of each option and how they work, and of course, what they cost. When you go to purchase a business under Maine law, you are still responsible if there is any tax liability left. So, um, for instance, if the former business owner had not paid their sales tax, unfortunately, you would still be responsible. You may still be responsible. Certainly, there's ways to write contracts when you purchase a business, but just be aware of that. And really, to protect yourselves, what you want to do is make sure that you get a tax clearance letter from the compliance division of the Maine Revenue Service. So this is in just another level. I always say to people, you also want to make sure that you get a letter from the state that it's a company in good standing too. But this specifically talks about sales tax. So you don't want to be in a situation where you're the person that ends up having to pay for somebody else's debt when you go to buy a business. This failure to file, right? So you got to make sure that you file on time. And if you intentionally um, fail to file with the state, all right, and there are people that have actually collected state sales tax and never filed it, that is a Class D crime. And you, as an owner or a representative, can be held personally liable. So you want to make sure that you get that um, done, filed on time. Now, if you get an extension on taxes, it doesn't mean that you get an extension from payment. It's just this, or from penalty or interest either. Um, so it just means that they've allowed you an extended amount of time to file it, but you're still responsible for that tax, and you may be responsible for interest as well as penalty. You need to keep accurate records of everything. So if you have a POS system, if you run everything through that, I would make sure that I used to print out my monthly reports of all my sales, and I would put everything, including my wholesale, into that. Exempt sales, every sale that I ever made within my business, I put in my POS system so it was all in one place. You also want to make sure that you keep track of resale. So if you're wholesaling to somebody else, you need to have those resale certificates and keep track of the amount of the sales that you made, all of those transactions. And also, sales made outside of the state of Maine, you're supposed to keep track and report those. And certainly have the totals for each taxable category that you're working with. This is the contact information for the Maine Revenue Service. They actually have in-office hours. You can go up to Augusta if you want to see them. Um, we have Business Maine Answers. And again, there's 11 advisors throughout the state of Maine. So hopefully one of us can help you with this. Certainly be willing to take a stab at it. It is a lot of information. There, excuse me, there are a lot of nuances to the Maine state sales tax, but myself and my colleagues, I'm sure would be happy to try and help you with that. And here's just a list of some of the things we have: our website, our e-learning platform, and we also have a YouTube channel as well. So you can look at what we have on our playlist. And now I'm going to stop share and I will open it up for any questions that people might have had if they're in the chat or if you want to unmute yourself. There we go. All right, so I have a few questions here. Right. Let's see, from Rory, I run a mobile art studio and they're interested in thrifting items. Oh, okay. So you're gonna purchase items. All right. It's funny, my nephew did this for a while. It's kind of neat. So you're gonna purchase items and then you're gonna like kind of add on to them and then resell them. That is a business, and certainly that would qualify for a resale certificate if you meet that $3,000 threshold. Um, so when you fill out your form, just make sure that you put in at least $3,000 in taxable sales if you don't meet that threshold. So you want to be honest here. If you're not going to make the $3,000 in sales, you still can deduct the tax when you go to file. So the taxes that you've paid on items that you're reselling. Again, keep your records. All right, James, let's see. You registered, all right, with the Maine tax portal. Um, All right. It looks like a retail or resale certificate may not be provided. No, you will automatically. So once you register the Maine, with the Maine tax portal, or if you fill out the form like we did here, then you will get your retail certificate. You should get a resale certificate if it's over that $3,000 in taxable sales. All right. And then, let's see, as a rental owner, let's see, we have to charge sales tax and was told we have tax exemptions when we purchase the rental equipment to rent. All right, so let's see. Would it be a regular resale certificate? We are mainly a seasonal. Okay, so I'm sorry, what kind of rentals is it that you rent? If you
We do
want,
like tents, tables, chairs,
okay, all
linens,
right.
everything like that.
Yeah. All right. So you purchase those, the tents, tables, and chairs, and then you rent them to other people?
Yep.
Okay. So the purchase of those items that are going to be rented, those are items that are you're collecting, the tax on, the sales tax on when you rent them. So you should be getting a resale certificate. Did you already apply for your resale or your retail certificate? Did you already register with the state?
The law just came into effect for this month, so I haven't done any of it because I'm still kind of trying to figure it all out on what to do.
Okay.
But I definitely need to get on it before the season picks up.
Yeah, certainly. And I see you said you struggle to determine your NAICS code, right?
Yep, when I do a search for rentals or party, I can't find anything. It just says nothing found.
Yeah, and it's funny, you kind of have to do in any of the SBDC advisors, because I know my few colleagues are on here, unmute and chime in if you have a better system. But I try to get something close to it as I possibly can. So like rental of wedding equipment, or like you said, tables and chairs, party rentals, anything like that. um as close as you can get to it is what is sufficient. Sometimes you could look up the SIC code as well, and it might give you something different. And usually, when you see something, if it seems similar, open it up and look at the description because it may be under a broader term.
Yeah, I do a similar thing, but I usually Google it because sometimes we think party rentals, right? And if you Google NAICS code party rentals or whatnot, then it might come up and say, oh, this is what you mean, and you're like, oh yeah, that is what I mean, and it's just a different wording than you would have thought of for what your industry is.
Yeah, that's true. Have you tried that, Denise? Is that helpful?
So I've tried party rentals, I've tried furniture rentals, I've tried equipment rentals, and none of them have pulled up.
But so you tried like NAICS code for those in a Google search, or you just,
No, no,
yeah,
just a regular on this thing. So try it in Google itself.
yeah, like what Pete
Okay.
was just saying. Absolutely, give that a whirl. Oh, oh, somebody, Ann, put that in. All right. So all other consumer good rentals. So apparently my colleague Ann got you the NAICS code. If you can see that in the chat.
I can, thank you.
Okay. Yep. And somebody else, James, found it as well. So great. Excellent.
Yeah. And
If folks,
why I Google it especially is sometimes it's a brand new industry like AI, right? And
right.
NAICS codes aren't keeping up with some industries. So um, thanks everyone for
Yeah, absolutely. Um, all right. And
In
if
regards
not,
to the seasonal part of my question, how would
yes.
that work? Because like normally throughout the year, I would say that I make at least 3,000 more in sales too, or have $600 worth of sales tax. But then there's probably like 4 to 5 months out of the year where I maybe have like $10 or $20 worth of sales tax I would probably collect.
Sure. So I think you're thinking of two different things. So the $3,000 in taxable sales, that relates to getting your resale certificate. Okay. And then the tax liability. So the $600 or more in tax liability. And like I said, that calculates to $10,909 in tax liabilities in a month. That triggers how often you file. So when you fill out that part for the sales and use tax and it says seasonal business, you would check that and then check the months that you're operating it. Okay. And those are the months that you're going to, be liable for sales. Now, that doesn't mean that you don't, have to file, especially if you do other sales beyond that. But that's going to say whether you're a monthly filer. So when you are on season, Denise, are you making more than $10,000 worth of sales in a month?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. So most likely you're going to be a monthly filer then.
Okay. So even in the off season, I should just leave it that way where there's only a couple months where I have like a smaller amount in
Well,
sales?
right, saying the months that you are operating, that's going to trigger the state to decide, if they're going to make you do a filing every single month, even when you're not operating. All right.
Okay.
Sometimes it does work out that you just file and then it's zero because you had zero in taxable sales, but you're still a monthly filer. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you.
Yep. All right, let's see. First time small home-based DBA sole proprietor business, and you haven't started nor signed up for sales and use online. All right, it says, I'm sorry, I'm just trying to read this, and Karen, I think, can you unmute yourself and just tell me exactly what you're looking for as far as your application will be delayed if not filled out?
Hi,
Hi.
this is my very first Zoom call or webinar, very first everything. So I tried to go online to sign up for the sales tax. I got to line 19 and it says, what do you estimate that your annual gross sales will be?
Yep.
Your application will be delayed if not answered or completed. If I haven't started a business yet, I haven't started collecting the sales tax yet, do I take my catalog of what I'm going to be selling and hope that everything is going to sell and take that and use that as a revenue or gross sales, and then multiply it by 12?
Sure. So the thing is, Karen, like, where are you going to be selling online, or are you going to be selling like at festivals, or what exactly? Where are you going to be selling?
I'm going to be doing online locally first. And then if that goes well, I'm going to be doing craft fairs and like farmers markets and stuff like that.
Okay. And can I ask what kind of product is it that you're selling? Is it a,
I'm doing crafts and I'm
okay.
also doing resale, upcycling and antiques and vintage stuff.
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, usually when we do a business plan with folks, we also do projections, right? So we kind of estimate, how many sales you're going to make at a certain time. And, you could probably do an estimate of online sales or even a goal, right? So you might say, my goal for my first year is that I'm going to do $5,000 worth of online sales. And then, I think I can sell at least 15 or 20 of my items per day at a heavily, attended craft fair. What would that add up to? So,
So I can estimate it. I don't
yeah.
have to actually put a number that, I mean, I can go high and not be penalized.
Absolutely. And what happens is if you're not making that $3,000 worth of sales in the year, the Maine Revenue Service, they do audit, it's not like coming to your place of business and audit, but they look through and they're like, okay, if you're registered as a retailer, and you estimate it, you're going to do $10,000 in taxes, but consistently for the first couple of years, you're in year three now, and you're still not meeting over $3,000, then they may come back and pull your resale certificate. But you're not going to be penalized
Okay.
for saying that it's more, right? You want to get as close as you think, but it sounds like what you're intending on doing, especially with all the events that you plan on participating in, that most likely you're going to have more than $3,000 worth of sales. So if you think it's going to be 10 or 15 or 20,000, you want to put that there.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, and it doesn't trigger tax. So the state isn't going to say, well, you said you're going to do $10,000 in sales, and now we're looking for $550 worth of tax, that you should have collected. Does that make sense?
It does. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thanks for asking. Does anybody else have questions? I thank everybody for throwing it in the chat, but you're welcome to come off mute and ask away. And a lot of this can be answered through the bulletins too, and it is a really deep subject. And tax code changes. I want people to be aware of that. My own personal experience, I was a personal chef way back like 20 years ago or so. And at the time, that wasn't a taxable service. Then fast forward now, that is taxable and it's nuanced, right? So you really have to read, when is that taxable and when's that not taxable. So there are certain things that have changed, and you know, reach out to us or consult with, any questions that you have. You can reach out to the state of Maine. So I'm going to stay on for just a couple more minutes. If anybody has any questions, please let me know. And I hope I answered. I'm just going to view the chat here, and it looks like I think I answered everybody's question that they had in the chat. Excellent. All right. Well, I want to thank everybody that showed up today, and I appreciate you being here. And I'm going to give you 11 minutes back in your day. So thank you very much. Have a good day.